Welcome back to the Classical Architecture Workshop. My name is Professor Brandon Rowe, and in this lecture we're going to continue our learning how to draw the Doric Order. In this video particularly, we're going to focus just on drawing the column base itself. So once again, just as we learned in the past video, the Doric order is one of 5 classical orders, and we are using William Ware's The American Vignola to create these proportions and this classical order. So a couple pointers here. These are plates from William Ware's book, The American Vignola, which we'll be using to construct this. One thing to note, however, with our drawing, we are not going to draw all of the fluting on the column base and capital, just for time purposes. But if you would like to dive into this in a little bit more detail, I'd refer you back to the American Vignola text itself. So this is the drawing that we will create in the end, and what we'll do is we will draw the first bottom half of this drawing in this video, and the next video we'll draw the top half for the column capital. Let's begin. Before we get started in this tutorial, you're going to need a couple of supplies. You're going to need, as we've used in the past, a rolling ruler or a triangle of sorts, like a builder's square, a architectural scale, a compass, as well as a pencil or pen to work with. So, as we get started, there's a couple of things that you should be aware of on the Doric base. We're going to construct this drawing so that we can draw them all together. This first video will just cover the Doric base. The next video will cover the column capital itself. So as we get started, since this is going to be a scaled architectural drawing, we are using as our baseline, we are assuming that the column diameter, right, D, as we learned in the earlier video with the block order, that width, that D dimension, is the equivalent of 1 foot or 12 inches. And the scale that we're going to draw this to is different than the block order. We are going to assume that D, or that every 3 inches equals 1 foot. So that is the baseline that we're going to use to create this drawing. So as you go ahead and get started, what I would do first is we are going to create a baseline for our drawing. The overall drawing itself, more or less, is going to be about 6 inches in width and 7.5 inches in height. So we're going to go ahead and do that first. So if I'm using my my triangle or builder's square, I will draw a vertical line up to 7.5 inches. That will be my top. And then I will draw a horizontal line on the bottom at about 6 inches in width. That will be kind of the extent of this drawing that we are going to create. So, with that, the first step that we need to attempt to accomplish is to start creating a couple of things. First off, we know that from our block drawing that the base, when we did a simplified version, the base height was 1/2 D. And so if D is 3 inches, that means that half D is going to be 1.5 inches. So we're going to create some graphic scales. But before we do that, however, a couple things you should be aware of with the base of the Doric column is that it is subdivided into a number of different classical moldings. This includes at the top here a fillet, a bead, a torus, a plinth, and then this area right here is a conge. And so we're going to go ahead and draw this bottom portion of our Doric base. So I'm going to use the rolling ruler first, and we're going to use this to be able to create a parallel line. We're going to line it up with that other vertical line that we created earlier. Offset that by about 1/8 of an inch. Create a vertical line in there. And right next to that, another 1/4 of an inch off, we're going to create another graphic scale. We're going to use that in just a minute. I would do it only to about halfway up your page on either side. So we'll do that. And since we are dealing with an architectural scale, we can use our scale to use the 3-inch scale here, and that is going to be our first mark on the drawing. So we're going to mark at 3 inches because that is 12 inches in reality, because that's the scale we're using. And then this one right next to it, we are going to cut that in half using the same scale. So I'm going to put a tick mark here at the 3 and right at the 6 inches. Okay, so the nice thing now is that we can go ahead and strike a couple horizontal lines. I'm going to use my rolling ruler for this. Make sure this is straight here. Pull this up to that first tick mark, which is 1.5 inches up. I'm going to do a light line across there. That is going to be the base of our, well, the height of the full base for the Doric column. Alright, so once we've got that in place, the next step is we're going to subdivide a couple of these other elements. On here you can see that once we've got, well, we'll label this first so we don't forget. But that is D, and then this is, we divided that into 2, so this is 1/2 D on either side. And then what we need to do from there is we need to subdivide D again into 2 other divisions. After we do that, we'll subdivide it into 3 and then subdivide one of those into 2. And so we'll create 3 more small little graphic scales that will guide us through these steps. Alright, so going back to the rolling ruler here, we are going to go offset about 1/4 of an inch, and we are only going to subdivide this bottom tier here into 2. So I'm going to offset that another 1/8 of an inch, and there we've got that next one. At this point I could still use my 3-inch scale here, and if I put it here, I've got 0 to 6 inches, and if I cut 6 into half, I'm going to put a tick mark right at the 3, and I'm going to put a 2 here. We subdivided it into 2. And now that I've got that, I'm going to subdivide this upper one into then 3 parts. So grab my rolling ruler again, pull this off about 1/4 of an inch, strike a line, and actually this line doesn't need to go to the full bottom. just to that upper portion. All right. So with that, I'm going to grab my triangle or my builder square here. Just add a line across. So this next area, we are going to subdivide this into 3 equal parts. And, you know, if we, in doing the math, what this comes out to is 1/4 of an inch. So if we use our 1/4 of an inch scale here, you can see if I place it at the 0, I've got 1, 2, and 3. So I can subdivide that fairly easily. And then the last one we are going to subdivide is this top tier right here. We're going to subdivide that into 2. So if I create another small little graphic scale using my rolling ruler, pull that off just for that upper third, and subdividing, if we're using the 1/4 inch scale again, we can easily subdivide that into 2 subparts. Okay, so the nice thing is that once we've got those in place, we can now go ahead and strike a couple of these molding lines. So you can see here we can strike these horizontals for the top of the fillet, the bead mold, the torus, and the plinth now. And actually I'm going to use my rolling ruler for this one, this exercise. So I'm going to place this here and pull down. I'm going to start with this first one that we just subdivided into 2. I'm going to strike this across. I'm going to go down one more. So that gets those 2 lines for the fillet and the bead. The torus mold is actually, when we subdivided that 3 times, it's actually going to be that full length here for the torus. So I'm going to go ahead and strike a line across here. And that should give us the information we need. Alright, so the next part is, you know, to set up this whole drawing in general, we need to go ahead and set the center line of the column and get that in place. So roughly, if I'm measuring from the side, it's about 3 inches in or so. And I'm actually going to just take mine about 3.5 inches. Just to be sure that we've got enough distance here. I'll also take it in and what we need to do now, once we've kind of marked that, we're going to go ahead and draft this center line. I'm going to use my triangle or my builder square to get a nice perpendicular line. And for our line type, we're going to do a dash dot. And this we're going to actually go up the full past the 7.5 inches. That's going to be our center line for our entire drawing. And we'll actually take it down below as well, just a little ways. Okay, so it should look something like that. Okay, so earlier we were saying, okay, well, the width of the column, then because of the scale we're drawing it at 3 inches equals 1 foot. And we said the column, if we were building this, would actually be 1 foot. So if we're using our 3-inch scale here, and I center it on the 6 inches, that is going to give me the width of the column just above the base. I'm going to go ahead and mark a line on either side here, so I have that information. And what we'll do with that is we're going to create a graphic scale now on the bottom. So I'm going to use my rolling ruler, place it on that bottom baseline, go down about 1/4 inch. Make sure we're being even on both sides. Go down another 1/8 inch. And that is going to be our marker for D. Okay, we're going to create one more just below this, and that is going to give us the outside dimensions for that bottom plinth. So I'm going to go down another 1/4 inch, create a horizontal line, go down another 1/8 inch, and create another horizontal line. So I should have something that looks kind of like that. Alright, so with that, we are going to use our rolling ruler and pull off of the left-hand side that marking that we just created for D. And I'm going to create a dashed line as it cuts through here for these bottom moldings. And then once it gets to the top of D, once we split that in two, 1/2 D, I'm just going to do a light solid line, take that up about half of the page. So it'll look something like that. And before you go away from there, I would also take that line back down to that second graphic scale that we created there on the bottom. I'll keep going over to that other line here. Create a dashed line through all of the moldings. Once I get to the top, I will do a light solid line as it goes up to about half the page. Perfect. So if we were to, I'm going to label this is D as well. This next bottom part, to get the sides for the plinth, we need to subdivide D into 6, and then add another 1/6 on either side to make it a total of 8/6. This is going to be 8/6 D. Alright, so we've already done the math here ahead of time, and because we're doing a scale drawing, I want you to use your 1/2 inch scale, so 1/2, and by doing this, if you center the number 4 here directly on that center line, then we can go 4 to one side and 4 to another side. Every 1/2 inch we're going to place a tick mark. Okay, so we'll go ahead here, 1 at 5, 6, one's already at 7, and we'll place 1 at 8. And then we'll do the same for this other side, 1 at 3, 1 at 2, 1, and 1 at 0. Perfect. Once we've done that, we're going to take these lines up, and that is going to give us the actual sides of our first part of the Doric base. So using our rolling ruler, then on the side, we're going to grab that to create a parallel vertical line. And we're only going to take it up to that first line there where we subdivided what's really 1/4 D here on that. We're going to keep rolling over until we get, oops, looks like I ran off the page there. So I'm going to set it up on this other side, move it across. And there we go. And this first part here, we call this the plinth. It's P-L-I-N-T-H. Okay, so once we've done that, and we've got this dashed line going up, the next part is what we need to do is with this division for the torus. So this next mold we're going to create is called the torus, T-O-R-U-S. Right above that we've got the bead. And then we have a fillet mold. Okay. So one of the easy ways is we subdivided this 3. We've got 2 tick marks here, and the torus is essentially too tall. So if we were to create a light line, oops, let's do it from the top going down here with our rolling ruler. Could even dash this in. I'm going to stop when it hits this other vertical dash line, and then I'll continue on this other side over here. What that does is that gives us the center point for the circle. And what we're going to need now, if you've got your 45-degree triangle with you, you can do this a number of ways, but this is typically the easier way. Using your 45-degree triangle, I'm going to place it at the corner of the top of the plinth, and right where this diagonal intersects that dashed line we just created, that will be the center of my circle. So I'm going to do this on the other side as well. Okay, so if I take now my compass, I'm going to place the center of it on that intersection. I'm going to reduce its size until it is the same side as that dashed line. So the pointy part of your compass will be on that intersection, and your drawing surface on the opposite. So that gives us the radius. And I'm going to start here at the bottom, which would be kind of the south quadrant. And this part is always tricky when they're really small circles like this. I'm going to put as much pressure as you can. And there we go. On that center point as you're turning the arc. You only need to do a half circle because a torus mold is only a half round. We can dash this in just so you can see that it really is only a half round molding. Okay, the bead is identical to this. It is also a half round, but it is so small that we really, the scale that we're drawing this at, we won't be able to actually use our compass here. So if I just do a straight line up, a dashed line from the other center line, that will become the location of the new half round, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball this and draw half of a circle there on the left and half on the right. And then from there, that same, with all of those centers lined up, I'm just going to go straight up on either side for the fillet. Okay, and when we create now this conge, it's essentially a quarter round. To do this, we are, you can use your 45-degree triangle, and what I would do is we're trying to find the center point of this distance, right at the top edge corner of the fillet. So if I draw a light diagonal line there on the one side, I will do the same on this other side before I flip my triangle. Then flip your triangle 180 degrees. And then we'll do the same for the other side. So we're going to make an X. And what that X is going to reveal to us is the center point for a circle. So if you were to take your compass, I think this is going to be way too small. Yeah, looks like it is. But if that was the center there, excuse me, that is not the center, it's up here at the top where we finish that box. That is the center, and we swing the arc up. That will be that conge molding. So actually it's a little bigger than what I was thinking. So it might work. Let's try this on the other side. So that is, excuse me, right there is the radius. So if I place it there on that corner and try to strike a quarter round there, that gives us the information that we needed for the conge. There's a little bit more details that tend to occur when we're actually applying the fluting. It gets a little bit slightly skinnier, but for the most part, for this drawing tutorial, that gives you the information that you need. So the last thing that we are going to apply to this really quickly is we are going to add a dimension stringer here on the side. So I'm going to use my large builder square, and I'm going to run this vertical line all the way up because we'll use it in the next tutorial as well. But what this gives us then, if I was to bring this line down from the top of the fillet, this is the base that we learned about earlier in our block order, and it is 1/2 D, which we have over here on the other side as well. Okay, so other than that, I would just thicken up some of your line weights show the full extent of those molding profiles. And we'll actually call this out. This is the kanji. And there you have it, folks. We've got our Doric base for our column. The next video we'll go over the Doric capital. Thanks so much for joining us.